Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to another episode review for the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, Season 2, Episode 9, Project Daedalus. So this episode starts out with Discovery being a fugitive ship from Starfleet and Section 31, and joining them is another welcome face, Admiral Cornwell, with her second appearance this season. It's really good to see her back. I really enjoy Jane Brooke in the role. So it's really good to see Admiral Cornwell again and to see her allied with this group, especially with, the missteps that some think that she may have made last season. And I certainly agree. Obviously, condoning genocide and that sort of thing is not something that a good Starfleet Admiral should do. So, hopefully she's on her way to redemption here. She questions Spock using an apparently 100% accurate lie detector test of some sort. Interesting looking piece of equipment that it's odd that we never see again, but there you have it. And determines that Spock is telling the truth, but it does conflict with evidence she has from Starbase 5 showing him breaking out and killing the doctors and guards there. From there, they proceed to Section 31 headquarters to confront Admiral Patar, whom Admiral Cornwell believes is unhinged and in control of everything. However, when they get there, and here's an interesting shock from the episode, Admiral Patar, as well as the three other admirals we saw in the last episode communicating with Section 31, have been killed and have been dead for a couple of weeks at least, which means that even when we saw them in last week's episode in the hologram transmission, they were also faked holograms by the AI that's controlling Section 31 Control. So an interesting development there, and we kind of learn more as this episode goes on that Control is looking to assert more power and become conscious by absorbing all the information on artificial intelligence that the Sphere from a few episodes back had gathered, and using Lieutenant Commander Arium to gain that information. This episode tells us more about Arium than we've ever gotten in previous episodes, and it's really too bad given the events of the end of the episode. And again, major spoilers, if you haven't watched this episode, you should not be watching this video. But at the end of the episode, Arium sacrifices herself for the crew of Discovery, and in an extremely moving scene, very, very well done by the writer, the director, and the actress Hannah Cheesman. This episode, I should say, was written by Michelle Paradise, who is announced to be one of the new showrunners for Discovery next season. And it was directed by Jonathan Frakes, a veteran of directing great Star Trek. So really interesting talents coming together for this episode. There are a few missteps in this one that made this not the best episode in my mind this season. Still a very good episode, but there are a few things that I want to talk a bit about. First of all, like I mentioned, Arium, the character development we get for her is very welcome, and it does make the ending of the episode very poignant. However, I think it would have worked a lot better if we'd seen that development over the course of this season rather than all crammed into this one episode. Again, like I said, it's very well done, but it seems very rushed. And if we'd have gotten these moments of her bonding with her crewmates and becoming friends with Tilly and friends with Detmer and Owoshikun and all of this over the course of the season, just little bits here and there, things like TNG did, for example, with the poker games. You'd get that in an episode every once in a while, and these kind of off-duty moments, which, like I said, are very welcome in this episode, but, it's a little bit too late. That said, the acting and everything comes together at the end of the episode to make that extremely moving, and it really is a credit to the writing and the direction and the acting that moment lands as well as it does, given the small amount of setup for it. I'm wondering now if we get an episode where, there's a lot of background development for Detmer or Owoshikun, if they'll all of a sudden start getting very worried. Like, oh, they're focusing on me a lot. Oh, crap, I'm going to die. Great. As I said, though, the acting is absolutely top-notch in this episode. If I have one thing about this episode that I'm going to praise above all else, it is the acting. There's an incredible scene between Ethan Peck and Sonequa Martin Green, Spock and Burnham, in her quarters, where she proposes that they play three-dimensional chess to kind of reassert Spock's logic. Spock is not at all interested in going through this exercise, and the confrontation just keeps escalating further and further. And both of these characters come from such interesting and unique viewpoints that it really is compelling. Spock is, of course, much more emotional here than we've seen before. And given what he's gone through, it's completely understandable and where he is in his life. Ethan Peck nails the young version of Spock. It's incredible. I see definitely, like I said, a younger version of Spock here, a little less mature, not quite as grounded and centered as he is in TOS, especially with what he's gone through. The emotion is completely believable. And, Spock comes across as more calm, but very quickly losing control, whereas Burnham comes across as less calm but still kind of more under control, if that makes sense. I'm not sure, and I would love to kind of get a look into the minds of the actors and see the kind of prep they did for this scene, because the emotion that's at play is really cool. There are a couple moments in this episode that don't quite land for me. Some logical things that kind of bugged me. First of all, when Discovery is making its way through the minefield, nobody suggests, firing at the mines or trying to destroy them that way. And I mean, all that's needed is a little piece of dialogue explaining why that's not possible. Maybe they're putting out some sort of distortion that disrupts target lock and they're far too small to hit manually or something like that. It's one of those things that maybe some people don't feel is completely necessary, but I did find myself wondering throughout that scene, why aren't they shooting at them? Why aren't they taking them out? And like I said, you can come up with an explanation in your head, but you shouldn't have to. There should be some sort of in-universe, in-story explanation for that. Another one that bugged me is at the end when Ariam is sacrificing herself. She's in the airlock and she's telling Burnham she's gained control of her voice, basically, but her actions are still geared towards getting through the door and killing Burnham and completing her mission that she's been assigned by the Section 31 AI control. But I found myself in that scene wondering, why aren't they beaming her out of there? Why, aren't they using the transporters? That sort of thing. And again, all that's needed is a little piece of dialogue. And maybe I missed it. I went over it a couple times and I didn't catch anything, but something like there's some sort of transport disruptors built into that part of the facility or something like that, right? Star Trek's no stranger to that. They've done that many times. So I would have appreciated something there. One other little moment that kind of stuck in my head, and part of it is because I recently with some friends watched the TNG episode, The Measure of a Man. And in that episode, there's this really great moment where Picard and Riker are in the office of Captain Philippe Louvois, convening a hearing to talk about whether Lieutenant Commander Data is a sentient living thing under Federation law or if he's property of Starfleet. And Riker is assigned to be the advocate for Bruce Maddox and arguing against the idea that Data is sentient and deserving of rights under the Federation. Captain Louvois says, you do your duty in there. If you don't, I will end this right then and there. And Riker leaves, and Picard, as Riker's leaving, says, we know our assigned duties. And he waits. There's a beat. He waits until Riker's out of the door and the door closes, and Picard says, you just make sure to do yours, as a kind of criticism of Captain Louvois. And that scene always stuck out to me because Picard isn't going to criticize a fellow captain in front of a junior officer, not a junior officer, but a lower ranked officer, Commander Riker. And that's just courtesy, and you're not going to do that. Contrast that with something that happens in this episode when Pike almost kind of comes unglued on Admiral Cornwell during the scene where they discover the mines around the Section 31 facility. And it's not a huge deal. It's a good scene. It's well acted, but that bit of Starfleet decorum where you just don't, upbraid a superior officer in front of lower ranked officers, it just rang a little not true to me. So that was a small criticism I had. And again, it's not the biggest deal. It's because that scene was fresh in my mind, and I always really loved that just little tiny attention to detail that seems to be missing slightly here. However, all of those concerns aside, I think that Project Daedalus is a really great episode, and it's really brought together at the end with the sacrifice of Ariam. That moment really is what coalesces this episode, and that entire fight scene, and then the emotion of Tilly trying to get through to Ariam and convince her, and managing to break through and making her conscious so that she's able to say goodbye and also, tell Burnham that she has to do this to save the ship and save the mission is incredibly emotional. And I love that Burnham isn't the one to do it. She's unable to do it, and it's up to Commander Nan to actually push the button and open the airlock and kill Arium. There's this kind of thread running through the episode where Burnham is kind of taking all of this on herself, and she's always blamed herself for tragedies and taken it upon herself to be the one to fix them. Like when she ran away from home believing the logic extremists were targeting them because of her, and Spock quite rightly criticizes her and saying, no, it was me that they were so upset about. It's not everything is about you. And in this case, Burnham isn't able to be the one to single-handedly save everything. She does need to rely on the people around her and not take everything on herself. And it's just this little kind of pull away from her having to always be the hero that I really appreciated. And I love that Nan got her little moment there. And also, a huge amount of relief, because I really did think they'd killed Nan off as well. There's a shot, and it looks like she has died, but she is able to recover when her breathing apparatus gets ripped off, and she's able to recover and kind of replace that and do what needs to be done. So really moving, really incredible scene, and some of the best drama in Star Trek in quite a while. So really great stuff. If some of the small plot details aside, Michelle Paradise has written a really great script here, and she really seems to have a handle on the emotions of the characters and what makes them tick. So some of those little technical details, I think, need a little bit of work, but for the most part, this episode comes together and works really well. Great direction, of course, by Jonathan Frakes. Not as many standout directorial moments in this episode as in his previous episodes, but still very competently done, and the episode looks very good. Of course, I should mention the title, Project Daedalus, doesn't really come into play in the episode until the closing moments when it gets name-dropped by Arium as something that Discovery needs to investigate. So, I kept expecting something to come up with regards to the title, and it really didn't until the end. So it was a bit of a tease, but hopefully we'll learn a lot more about that in the next episode, which is titled The Red Angel. So hopefully we learn a lot more about that entity as well. And some interesting stuff in the last few episodes of Discovery's second season. Really looking forward to it, and really looking forward to watching them with all of you. So with that said, what did you guys think of the episode Project Daedalus? Leave your comments in the comment section below. I love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for watching, and as usual, thank you to the Patreon supporters for helping me bring this video to you. You can help out the channel by going to patreon.com/Kertrats, and even just $1 a month really helps out. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing, and all that stuff that YouTubers always ask you to do. I appreciate it. I'll see you all in the next video. And until next time, if you start to do a lot of filling in of my backstory and background character development for me, I'm going to get a little bit worried.